I never thought I'd be telling this story, but sometimes life throws you into a chapter you never saw coming. My name is Linda, and for most of my life, my world revolved around my daughter, Emily. From the moment she was born, it was just the two of us against the world. We shared everything: late night talks, inside jokes, even our favorite ice cream flavors. I always believed our bond was unbreakable. It's a kind of connection that could weather any storm. But nothing prepares you for the day your own child turns on you. It happened so fast, I still catch myself wondering if I imagined it. One morning, Emily was my little girl, calling me for advice about her job, her friends, her future. By the end of that week, she was a stranger with a bank account bigger than I could ever dream of. $33 million. That's what she inherited. When her father, my ex-husband, a man who'd barely been in her life, passed away unexpectedly. I remember the look in her eyes when she told me the news. A mix of shock, excitement, and something else I couldn't quite place. I thought we'd celebrate together, maybe even plan a trip or pay off some old debts. Instead, within days, Emily sat me down at our kitchen table and told me to leave. No warning, no explanation that made sense, just cold, hard words that shattered everything I thought I knew about us. I packed my bags in silence, my heart breaking with every step. But what happened next changed everything. 'Cause just 3 days after she threw me out, Emily was the one calling, her voice shaking, begging for my help. And that's when I realized our story was far from over. If you'd asked me 20 years ago what my life would look like, I would have painted a picture of a small, cozy home filled with laughter, mismatched furniture, and the smell of something baking in the oven. That was the reality I built for Emily and me, even if it wasn't always easy. I became a single mother when Emily was just 2, after her father left us for a new life and, eventually, a new family. He sent birthday cards and the occasional check. But the real work, late night fevers, scraped knees, school projects, was all on me. We didn't have much, but I made sure Emily never felt the lack. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep the lights on and food on the table. I remember coming home from the diner, my feet aching, only to find Emily waiting up for me with a cup of tea she'd made herself. She'd curl up beside me on the couch, her head on my shoulder, and tell me about her day. Those moments were my reward. The reason I kept going when exhaustion threatened to swallow me whole. Our bond was forged in those years of struggle. I was her protector, her confidant, her biggest cheerleader. I taught her to be kind, to work hard, to never take anything for granted. We had our own little rituals: Sunday pancakes, movie nights with popcorn, handwritten notes tucked in too. Lunch boxes. I wanted her to know she was loved no matter what. As Emily grew older, things started to shift. It was subtle at first: a new group of friends, a sudden interest in designer clothes, a reluctance to spend time at home. Kate told myself it was normal, just part of growing up. But sometimes, late at night, I'd catch her scrolling through social media, comparing our life to the glossy, filtered images of her classmates. I could see the longing in her eyes, the quiet resentment that we didn't have what others did. High school brought new challenges. Emily was smart, ambitious, and beautiful, but she struggled to fit in. She started dating a boy from a wealthy family, and suddenly, our little world seemed too small for her. She'd come home with stories about lavish parties and expensive gifts, and I could feel her pulling away, one secret at a time. I tried to keep us close, to remind her of where she came from, but it was like holding onto water. No matter how tightly I gripped, she slipped further away. Still, I never stopped dreaming for her. I wanted Emily to have everything I never did: security, opportunity, a sense of belonging. I worked extra shifts to help pay for her college applications, cheered the loudest at her graduation, and cried tears of pride when she got her first job. I thought we'd made it through the hard part, that our bond would survive anything. But looking back, I can see the cracks that had started to form. The more Emily tasted the world outside our little home, the more she seemed to resent the sacrifices I'd made. She started questioning my choices, blaming me for things I couldn't control. Our conversations grew tense, filled with unspoken accusations and wounded pride. I tried to hold on, to remind her of the love that had always been our foundation. But sometimes, love isn't enough to bridge the distance that life and people can create. And as I would soon learn, All it takes is one moment, one windfall, to turn that distance into a chasm. The day Emily learned about the inheritance, I noticed a change in her almost immediately. It was as if a switch had flipped, one I hadn't even known existed. She came home that evening with a strange energy, her phone buzzing nonstop with messages from people I'd never heard of. She barely looked at me as she breezed through the door, tossing her bag onto the couch and heading straight to her room. "Emily, is everything okay?" I called after her, trying to keep my voice light. She poked her head out, her eyes shining, with something I couldn't quite read. "Yeah, Mom. It's a lot going on. I'll tell you later." Later never came. Over the next few days, Emily's world seemed to expand while mine shrank. She started spending more time out of the house, coming home late with stories about fancy dinners and new friends who seemed to appear out of nowhere. I'd hear her laughing on the phone, her voice higher and more brittle than I remembered. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd shrug me off. "Just people from Dad's side. They want to get to know me now." I tried to be happy for her, but something about it all felt off. One night, as I was cleaning up the kitchen, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway. "No, I'm serious. She's so old-fashioned, she doesn't get it. Once the money comes through, I'll finally be able to do what I want." Her words stung, sharp and unexpected. I wanted to confront her, to ask what she meant, but I bit my tongue. Maybe she was just venting. Maybe I was reading too much into it, but the slights kept coming. She started making comments about my clothes, the car I drove, even the way I decorated the house. "You know, Mom, we could really use an upgrade around here. Maybe get rid of some of this old stuff." She gestured to the family photos on the mantel, the ones I'd cherished for years. I tried to laugh it off. "Those are memories, Em. You can't just throw them away." She rolled her eyes. "Memories don't pay the bills or impress anyone." It wasn't just the things she said did, was the way she said them. There was a new edge to her voice, a sense of superiority that made my stomach twist. She started bringing her new friends over, people who looked at me like I was the help. They'd sit in the living room talking about investments and luxury vacations, barely acknowledging my presence. One evening, I tried to join their conversation, offering to make snacks. Emily shot me a look that made me freeze in my tracks. "Mom, we're fine. You don't have to hover." I retreated to the kitchen, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I could hear them laughing, the sound muffled but unmistakably exclusive. I wondered when I'd become an outsider in the life I'd built. The tension between us grew with each passing day. Our conversations became minefields, every word a potential trigger. I tried to reach her, to remind her of who we were, but she seemed determined to push me away. One night, after another argument about her spending habits, I finally snapped. "Emily, what's happening to you? This isn't who you are." She glared at me, her jaw set. "Maybe this is who I've always been. Maybe you just never wanted to see it." Her words hung in the air, heavy and final. I felt something inside me break a quiet, aching realization that the daughter I knew was slipping away. But even then, I clung to hope. I told myself it was just a phase, that she'd come back to me once the excitement wore off. I had no idea how wrong I was, or how much further we still had to fall. The morning the money finally hit Emily's account, I woke up to the sound of her laughter echoing down the hallway. It was a sharp, unfamiliar sound, nothing like the giggles I remembered from her childhood. I found her in the kitchen, phone in hand, surrounded by a group of her new friends. They were all dressed in designer clothes, sipping lattes from a tray someone must have brought in. The air was thick with excitement, but I felt like an intruder in my own home. "Morning, Mom," Emily said, barely glancing at me. "We're celebrating." I tried to smile, but my heart was pounding. "Celebrating what?" She flashed her phone at me, the screen filled with numbers I could hardly comprehend. "It's official. 33 million. Can you believe it?" Her friends cheered, raising their cups in a toast. I forced a laugh, but inside I felt a cold wave of dread. I wanted to hug her, to tell her how proud I was, but she was already turning away. Lost in the crowd, the rest of the day passed in a blur. People came and went. Deliveries arrived, expensive clothes, electronics, even a new set of luggage. Emily barely spoke to me, except to ask if I could give them some space. I retreated to my bedroom, trying to stay out of the way, but every sound from the living room felt like a reminder that I no longer belonged. That evening, after everyone had left, Emily knocked on my door. Her face was serious, her eyes cold. She didn't sit down. She just stood there, arms crossed as if she was bracing herself for a fight. "Mom, we need to talk." I nodded, my stomach twisting. "Course, what's going on?" She took a deep breath, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and something else, maybe fear. "I've been thinking. I need to start living my own life. I can't do that with you here. Always watching, always judging. You've held me back for years and I'm done." Her words hit me like a slap. "Held you back? Emily, I've only ever wanted what's best for you." She shook her head, her jaw clenched. "You don't get it. You never have. I need space. I need to figure things out on my own. I want you to move out." Tonight, for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of the daughter I knew. But all I saw was a stranger, someone hardened by pride, blinded by the promise of a new life. "Emily, this is my home too. Where am I supposed to go?" She looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll send you some money. You'll be fine. But I need you gone." The humiliation burned in my chest. I wanted to scream, to beg her to reconsider, but I knew it would only make things worse. So I nodded, numb, and began packing my things. Each item I placed in my suitcase felt like a piece of my heart being torn away. The photos, the little trinkets from our life together, the notes she'd written me as a child, I took them all, unsure if I'd ever see this place or her the same way again. As I walked out the door, Emily didn't say goodbye. She just stood there, arms folded, watching me leave. I could feel the eyes of her friends on me, their whispers following me down the driveway. I drove away with tears streaming down my face, my world shattered by the one person I'd loved more than anything. But as I sat alone in a cheap motel room that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. I knew Emily, even if she didn't know herself anymore. And deep down, I sensed that her newfound fortune would bring consequences she couldn't possibly imagine. The first night away from home, I barely slept. The motel room was cold and impersonal, the hum of the air conditioner a poor substitute for the comfort of my own bed. I lay awake, replaying Emily's words over and over, trying to make sense of how everything had changed so quickly. My phone buzzed with messages from my sister, my cousin, even a few old friends who'd heard through the grapevine that something had happened. I didn't have the energy to explain. How do you tell people your own child has thrown you out? The next morning, I forced myself to get up and face the day. I found a small apartment for rent on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but at least it was mine. The landlord, a kind older woman named Mrs. Patel, didn't ask too many questions when I showed up with my suitcase and tired eyes. She just handed me the keys and told me to let her know if I needed anything. I thanked her, holding back tears, and tried to settle into my new reality. Meanwhile, Emily's world was spinning in the opposite direction. I heard bits and pieces from mutual friends and the occasional social media post that slipped through. My feed, she was everywhere, shopping sprees, parties, expensive dinners with people I'd never seen before. Her phone was filled with new contacts, her days a blur of excitement and excess. She bought a new car, redecorated the house, and even booked a trip to Europe with her so-called friends. But beneath the surface, cracks were already starting to show. My sister called one evening, her voice tight with concern. "Linda, have you seen what Emily's posting? She's out every night, spending money like it's nothing. I'm worried about her." I tried to sound calm, but my heart ached. She's an adult. She'll have to learn some things the hard way. Still, I couldn't help but check her social media, scrolling through photos of her surrounded by people who looked more interested in the champagne than in her. The comments were full of flattery and envy, but I recognized the emptiness behind. The smiles. I knew Emily better than anyone, and I could see the loneliness creeping in around the edges. While she was out living her new life, I was left to pick up the pieces of mine. I spent my days searching for work, filling out applications, and trying to keep my mind busy. At night, the silence pressed in, broken only by the occasional call from a relative wanting to know what had happened. Some offered sympathy, others Judgment. Maybe you were too soft on her, one aunt said. Kids these days don't appreciate anything. I wanted to defend Emily, to explain that she was just lost, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't know how to justify her actions or my own heartbreak. The contrast between our lives couldn't have been starker. Emily was surrounded by people, yet I'd never seen her look so alone. I was physically alone, but I felt a strange sense of peace starting to settle in. For the first time in years, I had space to think about myself, my needs, my dreams, the parts of me I'd set aside for her. But the pain lingered. Every time I unpacked a box or hung a picture on the wall, I thought of Emily. I wondered if she missed me, if she regretted what she'd done. I doubted it, especially when I saw her latest post, a photo of her at a rooftop bar, captioned, "Living my best life." Yet, even as I tried to move forward, I sensed that Emily's new world was built on shaky ground. The people she called friends were nowhere to be found when the party ended. The money that had seemed endless was already starting to dwindle, and the loneliness I saw in her eyes was growing day by day. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew the story wasn't over, not for her, and not for me. On the third night in my new apartment, I was sitting at the tiny kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea gone cold, when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. The number was familiar, but after everything that had happened, I hesitated. My heart pounded as I picked up, bracing myself for whatever might come. "Mom." Emily's voice was barely more than a whisper, thick with tears. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just listened to her breathing, ragged and desperate. On the other end of the line, "Emily, what's wrong?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, a mix of worry and the hurt I still carried. She broke down completely. I could hear her sobbing, the kind of deep, gut-wrenching cries hadn't heard since she was a little girl and scraped her knee on the playground. "Mom, I messed up. I messed up so bad. Please, I need you." I closed, my eyes fighting back my own tears. Part of me wanted to hang up to protect myself from more pain. But another part of the part that had stayed up all night with her fevers, that had cheered her on at every school play, couldn't turn away. "What happened, Emily?" I asked, my voice softer now. She tried to explain between sobs. The friends she'd trusted had disappeared as soon as the money started to run out. Someone she thought cared about her had stolen from her, and now she was facing threats and bills. She didn't understand. She was scared, alone, and completely overwhelmed. "I don't know what to do, Mom. I thought I could handle it, but I can't. I need you. Please, can you come home?" Her words cut through me, reopening wounds I'd tried to close. I wanted to rush to her side to fix everything like I always had. But I also remembered the humiliation, the coldness in her eyes as she'd told me to leave. I sat there, torn between my pride and my love for her. "Emily, you hurt me," I said quietly. "You threw me out of my own home. Do you understand how much that broke me?" She was silent for a moment, then whispered, "I know. I'm so sorry, Mom. I was stupid. I let the money and those people get to my head. I thought I didn't need you, but I was wrong. I need you more than ever." I took a shaky breath, feeling the weight of her words. I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about her, was about freeing myself from the bitterness that had started to take root in my heart. I couldn't erase what she'd done, but I could choose what happened next. "I'll come," I said finally, my voice steady. "But things have to change, Emily. I won't let you treat me like that again." She promised through her tears that she understood, that she'd do anything to make it right. As I hung up, I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. I was going back, but this time I was determined to stand up for myself. Too little did I know, returning home would be just the beginning of a new chapter, one that would test both of us in ways we never expected. When I walked back into the house, it felt both familiar and foreign. The furniture was new, the walls freshly painted, but the air was heavy with regret. Emily met me at the door, her face pale and drawn, eyes red from crying. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she threw her arms around me, clinging as if she might drown without the anchor of my embrace. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know how I let it get this far." I held her, but I didn't lose myself in the comfort of old habits. I'd promised myself things would be different, And I meant it. When she finally let go, I looked her in the eye and said, I'm here to help, but I won't be treated the way I was before. We need to talk about boundaries, Emily, about respect. She nodded, wiping her tears. I know I want to fix things. I want to be better. We sat at the kitchen table, so different from the one we'd shared for years, but still a place for hard truths. Emily laid out the mess she'd made, the money she'd blown through, the debts she'd racked up, the so-called friends who'd vanished as soon as the spending stopped. She showed me threatening messages from people she'd trusted, and I saw the fear in her eyes. I thought I could handle it all, she admitted, her voice small. I thought money would solve everything, but it just made everything worse. I listened, letting her speak without interruption. When she finished, I took her hand. We can get through this, but you have to be honest with me and with yourself. No more secrets, no more pretending. We spent the next few days sorting through the chaos. I helped her contact a financial advisor, someone who could help her untangle the mess and set up a plan for what was left. We made lists of what needed to be sold, what debts had to be paid, and who needed to be cut out of her life for good. It was exhausting, and there were moments when Emily broke down, overwhelmed by shame and guilt. But I didn't let her wallow. You made mistakes, but you're not alone. I'm here, but you have to do the work, too. We really talked for the first time in years about her loneliness, her insecurities, the way she'd let other people's opinions shape her choices. I shared my own fears, my pain at being pushed aside, and the boundaries I needed to feel safe again. It wasn't easy. There were tears, apologies, and even a few arguments. But slowly, trust began to grow back. Fragile, but real. I could see Emily changing bit by bit. She started reaching out to old friends who'd cared about her before the money, apologizing for how she'd treated them. She volunteered at a local shelter, trying to reconnect with the values I'd tried to teach her. And she respected my space, asking before making decisions that affected us both. Things weren't perfect. There were scars that wouldn't fade overnight, and I knew we'd both have to work to keep our relationship healthy. But for the first time in a long while, I felt hope. We were building something new, not the same as before, but maybe, in some ways, even stronger. As I watched Emily take responsibility for her life, I realized that sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that bring us back to ourselves and to each other. Looking back, I never imagined my relationship with Emily would be tested in such a brutal public way. I always believed that love, especially a mother's love, could survive anything. But I've learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all. Self-sacrifice, and sometimes it can even become self-destruction. I had to lose everything, even my place in my own daughter's life, to finally understand the importance of self-respect. Forgiving Emily wasn't easy. There were nights I lay awake, replaying her words, feeling the sting of betrayal all over again. But holding on to that pain would have only poisoned me further. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't about excusing what someone did. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of their actions. It's about choosing to move forward, even if the scars remain. I also learned that unconditional love has its limits. It doesn't mean accepting mistreatment or erasing your own needs. It means loving someone enough to let them face the consequences of their choices and loving yourself enough to walk away if you must. Emily and I both had to grow up in our own ways. She had to learn that money can't buy loyalty or fill the emptiness inside. I had to learn that my worth isn't defined by how much I give or how much I'm needed. If you're listening to this and you've been betrayed by someone you love, know that you're not alone. Your pain is real, and your healing matters. Set your boundaries. Stand up for yourself, even when it hurts. And when the time is right, don't be afraid to forgive, not just for them, but for your own peace. Our story isn't over. Life has a way of throwing new challenges at us when we least expect it. But I'm stronger now, and so is Emily. If you want to hear what happened next, or if you have your own story to share, stay tuned. You never know whose life your truth might change.